there's evidence that Arthur was a real person.
Okay, first of all, historians don't agree on that at all.
And I had forgotten about that, but like
God.
I know, like when we first saw this, you were immediately grumbling, like, "Oh."
Because here's the thing. Yeah, the entire point of this film is like historians agree that there was a King Arthur, and I'm like, no, they absolutely don't.
No.
I fall into the camp that there was probably a guy who had some sort of warlord status in the power vacuum that was the post-Roman Britain. His name was probably something like Arthur. You know, there are variations, whatever. And this film borrows from that, Artorius.
Yeah.
There was probably a guy that then a whole bunch of legends accrued around. Now,
Or there is multiple guys.
yes, absolutely. There are multiple guys. I think I brought up in the pre-show. I can't remember. Riotamus, which was a guy who lived around 475. There are a bunch of there's Ambrosius Aurelianus. There's a whole bunch of guys that could have eventually agglomerated into King Arthur.
And like all the stories we know are from France.
Right.
They're not fact checking anything.
No, absolutely not. And when the French were writing, they're just cobbling together some bits of folklore from Welsh bards, Breton bards, like a whole bunch of stuff that is just kind of getting smushed together, right? So you can't say historically there was an Arthur. Well, that doesn't. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. Like I'm just sitting here just getting angry at the thought. I'm sorry. Like I'm becoming inarticulate. Yeah, there a historical King Arthur. What does that even mean? And to be fair, like again, this is kind of how we met. Was arguing about this, but no, there wasn't a historical King Arthur. If what you hold in your head is this idea of knights and the round table and castles and stuff, and so the opening of the film was like, the story that we got in the 15th century is King Arthur, blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, first of all, when you say the 15th century, I understand that you're probably referring to Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur, but even that was him translating and smushing together a very, very long text that we now call the Lancelot Grail or Vulgate cycle of French romances. And so like, and that dates to, I guess, the 13th century, not the 15th. And then when you get into, even beyond that, the Vulgate cycle was, an expansion upon Robert de Boron's Grail Quest, which is like actually several different poems and like, and then like that's all leaving out, Geoffrey of Monmouth, and Geoffrey of Monmouth, kind of important. Even Geoffrey of Monmouth, there was somebody before him. There was Nennius, okay, and Nennius is working with a whole bunch of Welsh material. So like you can't just say the 15th century, and you can't just say there's a historical Arthur. And like, it is a ship of Theseus. It is a mess. Arthur is a mess. And this movie puts itself out there as like, we're taking the mess and we're like clearing everything off so that you get the bare bones. And I'm like, but that's not the bare bones. You've just made a whole bunch of stuff up. And the worst part is when I'm watching this and I realize, my poor mother is sitting there and she's just like, who are they talking with? Because they bring up Pelagius and the Pelagian controversy. And she's just like, what are they talking about? And I'm just like, oh my God. Yes, if you're watching this film and you have no idea who the Woads are, which are supposed to be the Picts, and that's a whole other thing, and like you have no idea who Stellan Skarsgard even is in this movie, and he's not even Hengist or Horsa, he's Cerdic or whatever, or Cerdic or Cedric, I can't remember now, Cerdic, and like his sidekick is Kenric, and like that's out of the Anglo-Saxon chronicles that were only written down in like the 11th or 12th century, and it's just like they don't even name who these guys are, but oh my God. So my mom's sitting there and she's like, do you have any, Dennis?
Yeah.
Do you know who Pelagius is?
Now I do.
Who is he?
He gave us free will.
Oh, no. I mean, kind of, but no. All right. Pelagius was a philosopher, a theologian from Britain when it was a Roman colony, although he may have actually been Irish. There's some debate as to where Pelagius comes from. If he was Irish, that'd be really weird because his name starts with a P, and that's not like an Irish thing, and because the Irish don't actually have the letter P in their language. It's a long story. I know they do now, but they didn't 1,500 years ago. It's complicated. Like Patrick, blah blah blah, Latin, fine. But the point is, Pelagius, yes, he was a theologian and a philosopher, and he had this idea that we've got the idea of original sin all wrong. Because here's the thing, like original sin is not actually in the Bible. It's actually something that was a concept developed, and it doesn't really come into being until I guess the late 4th century into the early 5th, and it has to do with guys like Augustine and St. Jerome and all those people trying to figure out theology and all the rest of it. Anyway, Pelagius said the whole concept of original sin is kind of weird, and we actually have free will, and so it's this idea, you're getting into like the concept of why did Jesus come, and what does it mean to be saved, and what does any of that stuff mean? And like I don't want to get into a derailment of the concept of original sin and the controversies of the late 4th, early 5th century Christianity, but why does this movie bring it up?
Because he gave us free will.
No! I really think it's bizarre that this movie does a huge detour into the Pelagian controversy. Like, what?
Well, we should mention the title card after saying historians agree.
No, they don't, but go on.
Then said, recently discovered archaeological evidence sheds light on his true identity.
It doesn't.
Like, do you think that was based on anything? Like, did they find a sword?
No.
That said,
definitely not.
We're helping the Woads.
No, they did not find that. Trust me.